Zero.
So welcome to this event organized by the Graduate Institute Albert Hirschman Centre on Democracy, jointly with the research project Reversing the Gaze towards post-comparative area studies. So we are taking this opportunity to share some emerging findings from a workshop that we have organized today with scholars, experts from different countries across the European continent. And we are organizing this workshop as part of the Geneva Democracy Week, in which we would like to discuss in an international comparative way issues, but also creative responses to challenges to democracies in Switzerland, Europe, and beyond. And the topic of this event today is actually very connected to a challenge which is not only political, not only institutional, but also economic. And it's about the energy crisis and the types of responses that institutions at different levels of governance have been designing or thinking about, also building on the experience of previous responses to previous or other ongoing crises. So this was the theme that we proposed to discuss in the workshop today, and we have thought of having this one-hour event to share some emerging findings, as I said. And I have with me today, I have the pleasure to have with me a great panel composed by 3 scholars who have come to Geneva for Democracy Week, for this workshop, and who have been contributing from their ongoing analysis to this question of reprogramming and managing large-scale public funding. So I have the pleasure to introduce Nguyen, who is a policy fellow for EU institutions and democracy at the Jacques Delors Centre at Hertie School in Berlin. Before joining the center, she was an assistant professor of comparative constitutional law at the Department of Public Law at Maastricht University. And I would like also to highlight one of the recent publications of 2 that is entitled How to Spend It Right, a More Democratic Governance for the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is a policy paper that she published with Lucas Gutenberg in 2020. We have my colleague Luciano Monti, professor of European Union policies at Luis University in Rome, who is also a member of the Intergeneration Evaluation of Public Policies Committee at the Italian Presidency of the Council of Ministers. Luciano is also involved in the research project that I mentioned called Reversing the Gaze, which is supported by the Swiss National Science Foundation. And he also authored several policy briefs recently, including one which was just published in September on the National Recovery Plan in Italy. And on my left, I have the pleasure to welcome Elena Ajakovic, who is professor of public economics at the University of Belgrade in Serbia. She's also involved at the London School of Economics as Atlantic Fellow for Social and Economic Equity at the International Inequalities Institute at LSE. Her main research interests are the labor markets, poverty and income inequality effects on tax and benefit policies. So we actually thought to have these 3 colleagues who would act as rapporteurs as well on the sessions that we had today. And as you see, they also bring different disciplinary perspectives, different backgrounds, constitutional law, and public policies and economics. So I think those are 3 core methodologies and disciplines that we are building also in our reflection on the responses that are brought about at the European Union level, but not only, and actually the kind of focus of today's discussion is beyond the EU as well, and we have had discussions also involving colleagues from Switzerland, and we have also discussed about challenges and issue areas and responses in the regions of the Balkans, in the UK as well. So I think the overall goal of this conversation that we have had today and that we are willing to continue in the next weeks and months, as we believe it's important also to bring together these perspectives and try also to inform policies. And I think this is also one of the endeavors of our research project and of our center, and one of the research pillars that we have at the Democracy Center here in Geneva is precisely about mobilization, accountability, and public policy. So I think this is a very timely session, and I would like to thank you for being with us in Geneva today. So the way we propose to organize this session tonight is about bringing some key points that have emerged from the discussion, and we're actually working on a policy brief, which would be jointly presented and authored and probably published quite soon. And before entering into the details of the policy briefs and highlighting the recommendations that we would make to public institutions at different levels of governance in how to think of recommendations, how to think of financial instruments and fiscal rules, we would like to have some highlights from your work, the three colleagues, on the democratic context and the question of accountability when designing those large-scale programs and when implementing them, with Tu and Nguyen. Then we would like also to have some points on the more social policy and welfare aspects that are really key, I think, in this debate with Elena. And Luciano will dig into the politics and the governance aspects of the recovery and the new schemes. So I would first invite you to also building on the policy brief that I mentioned before, and on your ongoing work and the insights that you would like to share about this kind of governance and democratic accountability aspects.
Yeah, very happy to, and thank you again for the invitation. So this is based on the work that we did in 2020. So for the current recovery resilience facility in Europe, we should somewhat say it to bring this in, but I think the discussions are still important for any future instruments or other instruments elsewhere that might happen. And the starting point of our paper was that decisions on how funds that are collected at the European level or central level, any level really, the decision of how such money is spent at the national level is not a technical decision, but a really fully political one. It's a political decision how billions of European public money is being spent by national governments. And being a political decision, it of course raises the question of how democratic and how accountable are the decision-making procedures when it comes to the question on what kind of projects is this money spent, how is it spent, what priorities. While some criteria, of course, are laid down in secondary legislation at European level, we have the RF regulation that says that sort of gives the priorities and a framework for the plans or for where national governments can spend the money, but there's still a lot of discretion that remains in the negotiations of where does this money flow. So that was our starting point, and we argued that actually in order for the spending of the money to first of all be legitimate, but also to reduce the risk of misspent funds and wrongly spent funds, or to reduce the risk of funds spent not according to European interests, there should have been a better involvement of parliaments, both at the national and at the European level. And this is for three distinct but very much related reasons. On the one hand, to involve national parliaments and European Parliament would or can foster political ownership, also of the plans in which we lay down, in which the governments really lay down where they spend the money. In the end, this is really important to have this national ownership, because it is, of course, if the money is now not spent correctly, or if the projects don't prove to be successful, or if there's any doubts about it, it of course calls the entire RF and NextGeneration EU into question. Also calls into question the ability of the EU to manage large scale funds, right, and to be entrusted with fiscal policy making again. So there should be a broad consensus both at the European level and the national level that these are in fact the priorities for which we would like to spend common money. And this is fostered, or this is achieved through public debate. Right? If you want to foster political ownership in the debate, in society, on the political level, you do it via public discussions and not through bilateral closed doors negotiations, or not only through bilateral closed door negotiations. Secondly, again, this is European money, and of course there's a negotiation. There should be sort of an alignment between national interest and European interest, right? So this is not just according to European interest, but governments have a large say in how they spend the RF money. Nonetheless, there should be an alignment with common European interests. And the question is whether this is something that really should be left to the European Commission and the member states alone. Because how it currently works, or under the current RF, it's the Commission and the member states negotiate the plans, and then it is approved by the Council, right, by the other member states. Problem is, member states are not necessarily known to scrutinize each other so much in these intergovernmental fora, when they all depend on each other's approval. All member states need the other member states to approve their plans. So experience has shown that it doesn't necessarily work. So the argument, or our argument, was that to have the European Parliament involved would simply be to have a second pair of European eyes looking at what is this money spent on, or where do we want this money to go in the next 6 years or 5 years, in which this recovery and resilience facility is running. And then on a more general level, perhaps, we also argued that the European Parliament has seen an increase in rights, actually, over the years, right? So since the existence of the EU, what we have seen is really a strengthening of the European Parliament, and then not involving the European Parliament in something large and new as RF might be a bit of a scale back or rollback of the progress that we have seen for the European Parliament. Similarly, it would have been good, or it is good, to involve national parliaments at the national level, very similar to why we want the European Parliament at the European level, is again to reach a broad consensus, also at national level, that this is where the money should be spent, and these are the national priorities that everyone agrees are the correct ones. I mean, neither the national parliaments nor the European Parliament actually do have a veto right in the setup as it has been adopted. It doesn't mean that they're not involved at all. So the European Parliament managed to integrate the dialogue with the Commission, the recovery and resilience dialogue, into the governance framework. So it can invite the Commission to come to Parliament and discuss the plans, the implementation, the assessments, the payments. The Commission needs to take it into account, but it is not binding on the Commission. And as for the national parliaments, I think it really depends. So there, of course, then it goes back to the national level. Some parliaments were more involved than others, and that of course also becomes a bit more difficult because negotiations were mostly between the government and the Commission. And what we have seen, I mean, we made this proposal before there was the RF, so this was when it was still negotiated in Brussels. And what we have seen now after the RF has come into existence, also in particular when it comes to negotiating the plans between the governments and the Commission, is that indeed there was also a very large discrepancy in how the Commission could leverage the money against member states in negotiating the plans, right? So member states that received large sums of money, or member states that really needed the money were in a much weaker position vis-à-vis the Commission than member states that simply had more fiscal space like the COVID pandemic and didn't need the recovery money so much. So this was very much reduced to a Commission member state kind of negotiation, and having, or if we had the Parliament there, it would have perhaps maybe also strengthened the Commission's hands vis-à-vis those member states that were stronger, right? If the Commission had had the backup of the European Parliament to say, listen, there's little we can do, you need to include these reforms because we have the Parliament in our back, it might have had also, it would have been a different setup for the negotiations also. So that is sort of our work on that. I'm not sure whether there's a lot more to say at this point, so I think I will stop at that. But of course, again, this is a question that I think should continue to be raised. Also, if we look into the future, right? If we look into the debate of do we need new fiscal instruments as you can have it, do we need new fiscal capacities? The question comes up again, how do we involve the parliaments? This time, do we use the same setup as the RN, or do we need to improve, in fact, democratic accountability of the governments?
I ask you just a follow-up question. To what extent has the emergency situation led to bypass some of these democratic mechanisms, and to what extent do you think it could be improved in situations, of course, again, another crisis, but which have maybe been anticipated a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, what needs to be said is that, of course, the regulation for the recovery and resilience facility and also now REPower needs to be passed by Parliament, right? So if we now want to adapt the RF to the crisis, including REPower, it still needs to be approved by Parliament. But nonetheless, when it comes to then approving the changes in the chapters and really the specific decision where the money goes, the European Parliament also still remains the sideline, I think, also with the crisis. And probably generally speaking, I think what we have seen is that crises are not necessarily conducive to more parliamentary involvement, right? I mean, normally crises are executive times. So I'm not sure whether crises are at the point in time when parliaments are more involved.
Thank you. Elena, could you perhaps elaborate on this dimension of social policy and welfare in the broader context of an emergency? I mean, to get back to this issue of how public institutions are responding to crisis, and how does the welfare really feature into this response, or how should it feature in the response?
Thank you, Christine. I just want to reflect on what you said at the introduction, that this is something that really impacts countries, no matter if they're EU member states or, let's say, UK, that is also going through a crisis. I mean, as we speak, they have a new government that proposed also some very large changes to the budget, and that will affect both the people, and the economy. So there are so many things that are going on, and it's also affecting countries like Switzerland and other that are not EU member states. And that's something that was created as a result of two recent, crises, the one with the COVID, that was public health crisis, and it also affected all of us, right? I mean, the whole world. But now this one, and we thought it was a disaster, but it seems this one with the war in Ukraine would be a bigger disaster. And especially in terms of these changes to the government's budgets, I think it will impact it more structurally than this COVID crisis. Why? Because as we discussed this morning, some decisions were brought overnight. Like governments decided that they will commit more funds to defense. Germany, increased with 1.2% of the GDP to 2%. Denmark announced increase in defense spending. Italy, Romania, Sweden and Finland decided that will join NATO and that will probably also increase their defense spending. Then we also discuss about this energy crisis. I mean, it would also cost a lot. We mentioned Germany that will commit like 200 billion euros only, to solve this emergency. That's only for this current winter, and these are not the funds that will go into the energy infrastructure, as I understand, but just to help the economy and the citizens to cushion the crisis. Why? Because German economy was used to cheap energy from Russia, and that provided competitiveness for the German economy, but now there is no cheap energy from Russia. So, and this will, this whole building the new energy infrastructure will mean that we will have to channel our government, public revenues into these, some things that we could not imagine like half a year ago or more, before the war started. And we are afraid, this is what I think we had a kind of consensus this morning, that will mean that some things like spending on the welfare state, or as we in Europe call it, social investments, and that's mainly investments in early childhood education and care, lifelong learning, vocational education, active labor market policies, or policies that help, women and other vulnerable groups to join the labor market. So this is something. It's a European. It was it's European. It's not. It was. It's still the European idea, European paradigm. Let's say European project. These kinds of social housing, also that's kind of social investment. And I'm afraid that spending on these items will really have to be reduced. And that is something, why are we all doing this? Intervening because of the energy crisis or increased defense spend. Okay, this is less, but these measures that are aimed at protecting citizens from increase in energy prices, this is because we want to preserve the living standards, right? But if we don't invest in education or healthcare, how can we, we are not building a productive workforce that is able to, to produce and to increase the living standards. It's just not possible. So I'm afraid that this is really, that's something that will be, forgotten for let's say medium term, what will be in 10 years or 15. I don't know, I cannot predict, but in, let's say, short to medium term, I'm afraid this is the scenario. And the thing that, of course, this is the most important topic. So who is to decide how citizens can be more involved into these decisions that are really brought overnight? Okay, I understand it's a crisis, so you need to respond, you need to, there are refugees coming, and this is really emergency, but for next year, so is there any opportunity, and what are the channels so that, citizens and citizenship organizations can be more involved, I don't know, for 2024 budget or things like that. So what are the ways? I think this is not my area, but I understand that this is really important. So what are the mechanisms? So that they ask us,
And in fact, as you point out, the mechanisms should be connected to the objectives. And one of the objectives of ensuring social welfare and the living standards of European people should also be really much more there than they might be in some aspects of the discussion. So I think we also need to bring that back into the picture as we discussed this morning. Luciano, what is your take on the overall governance and the kind of challenges that you see there for this
thank you for the invitation also. I think that to call a picture two of the main aspects, one was the democratic aspect, and the other one is the socio-economic aspect. Now we have also, let's say, the rules, the definition of rules to manage these funds. So we have also a problem of governance, of huge amounts of money. And here, in the morning, we focused on the European member states because we have particular specific rules to manage the funds. And as you probably know, our tradition is to have, let's say, an European spending framework based on a long-term planning. So we have the Recovery and Resilience Plan will end at 2026, and the cohesion policy ending 2029, the deadline for spending. So a really long period. So the question is how we can face, let's say, I will be optimistic and defining the path clearing opportunities of the crisis. Because if we reflect on COVID, certainly COVID accelerated the digitalization process, obviously. And we also hope that the Ukraine war will accelerate the environment. So the transition, the twin transition, the digitalization and environment will be accelerated, has been accelerated by the two crises. So the question is how we can help member states, but this would be a methodology that can be used also for non-member states, how we can, let's say, move the money in order to help people, companies, and institutions profiting of this, let's say, twin transformation. And here, this morning, this is the core of our, let's say, common policy brief. We found three, let's say, three pillars of three recommendations that we would like to address to our government and our institution in this very difficult moment. And also we will have a board of the council, I think, in 2 or 3 days. So it's something like overnight decisions. So we are worried about overnight decisions. So we will do our best to try to suggest. So we have three, let's say, suggestions, or we can see 3 recommendations. The first one is, obviously there is a major recommendation that is to coordinate a European response. Let's say, try to have a coordinated response. And it would be better if it would be a European response, so not the European Union, but UK, the Balkans, Switzerland, everybody, having, let's say, the same idea of integration. So we have 3 recommendations. The first one, I will briefly just give you a synthesis of what we will write in the paper. We decided this morning, and we are actually revising some of the text, but the first one is focus on implementation rather than on extensive reprogramming. In this period, the dilemma is between what I shall do to face a new crisis. I have two ways. The first one is to reprogram the plans. So say, I have a long-term plan, but I can say, okay, stop. Now I reprogram, I change objectives. Or the other way is to create a new instrument to face the new crisis. That, for instance, has been the case of NextGeneration EU and Recovery and Resilience Plan. In Europe, we decided we didn't touch let's say the cohesion, let's say the multi-annual financial framework, and we create a new instrument. So these are the two. Our suggestion is not try to modify the existing programs. So the idea is that the recovery facility should not be touched because it seems to be successful. This new approach that is a performance-based approach is successful. It's a new idea. We're not working on spending money, but checking the impact of the investments. So it's a very good idea. And we suggested to extend this methodology also to other funds, even national funds. Why not? It's a new experiment. But we remember that it's very difficult now to change the program because we are just in the middle. We started 2 years ago implementing the reform framework of the programs, but now we are starting spending. So in 2023 will be the year of expenditure. So if we stop now and we start reflecting of new objectives, that will be very risky, mainly for bigger countries that have to spend a huge amount of money, like Italy, Spain, Greece. So we have a lot of money and we cannot stop. You cannot think to stop now this. So this is the first recommendation. The second one is probably to remodel the current multi-annual financial programs. The multi-annual financial programs, I told you before, is a program starting in 2022, in fact, because we are just starting now, and we'll end in 2029, formally 2027, but let's say we have 2 years to spend the money. So the idea, the suggestion is to probably, if we have to modify something, we can modify that planning, because it's a new one. We do not have an implementation for the moment. And the idea is to modify not all, let's say, the framework, not the regional part of this plan, but just the central parts of this plan, in order to have a major synergy between the Recovery and Resilience Plan and the central part of our. I'm sorry, maybe for the people that is not in the European Union, maybe this is a little rather complex, but I'm trying to be as simple as possible. But I say we have two, in the ordinary cohesion policy, we have funds for regional investment and funds for national investment. So the idea is we suggest to concentrate on rescheduling of the national ones. And the third and last suggestion is how we can meet the energy challenge. So going practically, and here we are worried. We are worried about the proposal of the Commission. The Commission is proposing to use part of the cohesion funds without dividing between regional and national, say a huge part of, and put this money into a new chapter. It's called the energy chapter in the Resilience and Recovery Plan. We think that this is very dangerous because it was the second recommendation. It's difficult to, the first one, it's difficult to stop now and reprogram things. And so what we suggest, we have 3 suggestions. The first one is revising the National Investment Plan, the partnership agreement, so the national operational programs. The second, reconsider the possibility of financing REPower. This is the key, the core. And we discussed that it will be very difficult. Politically, it's very difficult, but we suggest to reconsider the possibility of financing the REPower EU into the international market, emitting Eurobonds. So we emitted Eurobonds for the NextGeneration EU. We emitted Eurobonds for the SURE program. SURE program was a program fighting against unemployment during the COVID. And the first one is to call for a new SURE program. That is also a proposal of some of the commissaires. But the key aspect will be try to convince all the member states to go back to the international market and finance also the REPower EU. This is obviously, we know that it's politically difficult, but in an academic and a scientific point of view, we think it will be the best solution.
Thank you, Luciano, for this synthesis. So maybe before opening the discussion, I would like to highlight 5 key points that emerged from the discussions today, on which we can then also build the discussion. So, and which also have been mentioned by Luciano as he went through this policy brief. So, one first point was that performance-based approach is welcome, and that it should be extended to also other public investments. And this is something that might be also interesting beyond the European Union as well. The second point is, and we discussed a lot about flexibility connected to reprogramming, connected also to implementation, also to the duration of the programs. So we synthesized the second point as flexibility is positive under certain conditions, and then we elaborate on the conditions. And there is a lot also of literature by scholars from a variety of institutions and also disciplinary backgrounds on this very question of flexibility. And also by the institutions themselves. I think this is also a very, very crucial point. The third element that we really agreed on was the need to defend the welfare investments. And this is really something we would like to highlight in our interactions also with the decision makers and with public opinion, also to raise this awareness about also the kind of decisions and the implications of these decisions that will be made. The fourth point was about this long-term perspective. We also need at the European level in particular to follow up and to kind of anticipate what will happen after 2026, which is the end of this ongoing programming period. So again, some kind of also longer term approach in a context where we have been facing crisis after crisis. So it's also maybe about thinking of emergency connected instruments. I mean, how to react to emergencies and both at the European level, but also globally. I mean, this is also something that we felt also in the Reversing the Gaze project, where we also have contexts of inquiry beyond Europe. This is really something which was striking. I mean, in this period, public institutions and citizens have been facing multifaceted crises in various fields, and maybe it's about also thinking of new, even global instruments to respond to these, including financially. And the fifth point is that we need to guarantee more democratic procedures in defining and redefining programs and social dialogue. And I think the notion of social dialogue also is very much there in this ongoing debate, and we would like to also have it central in the recommendations that we would make. So this is, I would say, a brief overview of what we discussed, what the different contributions were about, And I would like to open the discussion, and also with the speakers who might also elaborate on some of these points. Who would like to make a statement, a question, a comment on something connected to this debate?
If I may?
Sure.
In the first place, I would like to thank speakers for such an interesting presentation of the topics of today. My question is concerning the democratic participation in a multi-level perspectives. So, for sure, the role of Parliament is an important one to investigate, but I'm wondering also, in order to discuss it, if there are other types of legitimation that should be particularly considered, and investigate other types of fora or even new configuration of governments, such as networks, for example, in which or platform for consultation. So in that case, at institutional level, what would be the focus to adopt in order to ensure accountability and monitoring participation on that type of logics? Thank you.
On the question of participation of other levels of participation, other than parliamentary level, I have spoken, and this is not actually my field of work, but I've spoken to people that have actually criticized the lack of stakeholder involvement in the negotiations and adapting of the plans. So I think there is, I have been told, there's a lack of really involving stakeholders and interested parties at the national level when it comes to drafting the plans, right? So the national government, also because it had to go past, were really exclusive in the negotiation with the Commission and inviting these plans. So I think that is an important point to consider. Nonetheless, I think because we're talking about money here, we're talking about public money, tax money, I think that the focus for the most important part is still the parliamentary and the question of how to involve the representatives of the citizens in decisions that involve public money. But I think beyond that, there's also the question of the involvement, which unfortunately is a bit beyond my own work.
Would you like to react also on that, Luciano?
Well, this is a big problem because we on one side we have efficiency and the necessity we need to act very quickly. On the other side, we cannot admit a political decision concerning a huge amount of money without a political public debate. The problem is when sometimes, let's say, the rules of the European rules, the long-term European rules, could be an obstacle to, so we are not flexible. So obviously we said we are not flexible, we need more flexibility. But you have also to remember that if you have too much flexibility, when you have a change of government, like in Italy, or in actually in Italy, we have a change on an opposite. I mean, now we have a total different government. Obviously, the reaction of the government is to go to Brussels and change objectives because they have different objectives. So the fact that you have a long-term, unflexible rules sometimes is a guarantee that you do not move too much rapidly from one side to another one. So it's a sort of, let's say, it's a guarantee of stability, of balance in Europe. So we have to pay attention. I mean, I'm in favor of flexibility, but we have tried to find a political way to define what we need, how much we can be flexible. Because some decision has been taken at the European level. Then if you, and pacta sunt servanda, that is the concept. I mean, if a government decided to go there, is a member state decided something that is decided, so you cannot move, you cannot change the table or the rules of the play. So I think that that's why in the paper we are more in favor of new instruments instead of changing the actual ones. Otherwise, if you open to the changing of instruments that are already implemented, and so go there and go back and say, okay, so this is also a problem. We know we are facing the, let's say, internal Hungarian crisis, because we have a Hungarian that is actually, say, suspected not to respect the rules of law, and the Commission proposed to stop the funds. So, I mean, it's a very delicate aspect that of the democracy. So, on one side, we say you have to respect the rules of law. On the other side, we have to say you cannot change the idea if you change the government. And this has been accepted by all countries, and will be accepted also by our country. I'm actually explaining to the foreign press that no doubt that the new government will respect the old government decision. No doubt. Even if you are on the opposite side, but pacta sunt servanda, and they say the brand of a government or of a state is high if you are stable. You cannot change all politics just because you change the government. So stability is what we need in Europe in this moment, and also because we say we are under pressure. We are under pressure, so that is, I think, so democracy is very important. So I'm totally agree with her, but I wonder what could be the solution when you have a change of government, so you can, even if totally democratic, obviously, yeah? Because we had a democratic election, new government, and the new government will try to change something, but at the European level, it's the margin of maneuver, so it should be very tight. It's a guarantee it's the democratic guarantee for Europe, and probably for also the other country around us. Because if you have a stable union, the Balkans, Switzerland, UK, if you have a core that is stable, it's better for everybody. If we have an unstable United States, it's a problem. I mean, if we have an unstable China, or now we know the instability of the Russian politics, so it's a problem. So we look for stability, and so I have no solution. I know.
Yeah, so just on our second point about flexibility is positive under certain conditions, and we might add, and also in respect of democratic guarantees, I mean, flexibility should be limited by also democratic.
And pacta sunt servanda.
Exactly. Yeah.
You cannot touch that international principle.
Yeah.
Cannot change treaties because we don't agree on something.
Limited flexibility is welcome under circumstances.
Perhaps maybe a reaction to the flexibility issue under the RRF. I think I'm a bit less critical, and we've discussed it this morning also, I'm a bit less critical about the RRF or the National Recovery and Resilience Plans being flexible, because of course the changes that are made are changes that are negotiated between the member states and the Commission, right? So we're not talking about unilateral changes to the plans. That is not possible. It is a discussion, a negotiation, a renegotiation between member states and the Commission, which again then almost guarantees, or at least makes it more plausible, that these changes will somehow be within a corridor where national and European interests overlap, right? If it's not according to national interest, member states will not ask for a change. If it's not according to European interest, I kind of hope the Commission will not agree to it. So with that in the back of our minds, and then looking at the situation that we have right now, where you very rightly said, that we are under immense pressure, right? And there's really a need to become independent from fossil fuels, and a need to sort of somehow fund this at national level. And in the absence of any new money, I think flexibility is maybe what we actually need to re-channel the resources that we have to where they are most needed, both in the European interest and in the national interest. Because we're talking about a situation here where I think national and European interests are very similar, right? We need to become independent from Russian fossil fuels. So in that sense, re-channeling recovery money to REPower EU or to energy independence might not be the most ideal situation, which would be to have more money. But I'm not sure I'm entirely critical of it either, because I think it might be the one change that is of interest to everyone.
Thank you. Elena, would you like to comment on this?
Well, I wanted to comment on your proposal regarding the social dialogue. I'm just wondering what are the possibilities really to use. I mean, I'm thinking about the social dialogue in a strict definition, so between different social partners, because across the EU, or let's say Europe, social dialogue in different countries, in France means be stronger, or well, even in Germany, but in some other countries, I'm not that sure. So, I mean, maybe it's more a question for you. What was your proposal then when you said through the social dialogue? I mean, it should be like that, but I just don't see how, for instance, I don't know, unions could put the pressure, except in some or Netherlands, where of course they have their political parties, or I don't know, Slovenia traditionally they're very strong there, and they are very much involved in public policy making. But in some other countries, I mean, they're just not. I mean, they're really not that important.
Maybe, and I may turn to my colleague Maria Maxi, who is working precisely on social dialogue, but my view on that, also from maybe a more transnational perspective, would be to take this moment also to think of a social dialogue that happens at the European level, not necessarily anchored at the domestic levels, or at least connections between domestic levels, but ideally kind of platforms of dialogue that would be really trans-European. So given also the nature of the crisis and the nature of the instrument that we are thinking of to respond to this
crisis. It's a very
crisis.
good idea, but we needed to empower the European Parliament.
Yes,
Because
in
if
fact, we are getting back to
Parliament.
Yeah.
We are already European trade unions. They may lobby, but they cannot really influence the political debate, because the political debate is not in the Parliament. The Parliament has not the power to introduce a new law. So that's a very big limitation. That is one of the subject of the new agenda for the reform for the future of Europe. If we don't empower the Parliament, you can just make lobby to the Commission, but it's not really. It's not a social dialogue. That is a lobby. The social dialogue is intervene in the parliamentary rooms and explain auditions, and what we are looking for. I think we need the time to empower the European Parliament.
Yeah, it makes also very relevant to think of the broader reforms needed at the European Union level and the democratization at various levels. Maria, would you like to comment on this?
I fully agree in relation to the strengthening the role of the European Parliament, but the thing is that the recovery plans, for instance, or all other plans that have to do with the allocation of European funds are domestic plans, are national level plans. So it's not really about, it's about the European social partners, but it's about social partners working, that exists at the national level. So we really need to draw the social partners, meaning the business people, the trade unions, plus the government, the tripartite social dialogue, into more actively into drafting the domestic plans, the deliberation process, but also what we call tripartite plus, which means also including the civil society. I think I haven't checked the recovery plans of the European member states in its entirety, but I have the impression that very few countries involve the civil society in the process of consultation and drafting.
Very few.
Yeah.
There are some comparative studies that demonstrate the
And
contrary.
someone mentioned in the morning that, I think you mentioned in the morning that the way we allocate funds is not a technical question, it's a political one. So we are doing, as one friend of mine used to say, policy is politics. So now we are doing policy without politics, I mean, in the sense of democratic politics. So I think that we really need to empower people, to empower national parliaments, first of all, and then the European ones. But anyhow, what I wanted to ask you is that you mentioned the idea of having multiple instruments, and because of now we are going through multiple crises, so we need different type of instruments that speak to each other, right? But this would require some fundamental changes in relation to what we call the European acquis. I mean, it has to do with changes in relation to the unanimity rule. We need to make some changes there, possibly. Or another domain of change could also involve supranationalizing a number of policy fields. What is your take on these possibilities?
Well, the idea is, I think the best way is not just to speak about, let's say, transform the European experiment into from an intergovernmental to a supranational, but starting from some domain. And we call it European goods. So if you, for instance, if you recognize that energy is a common European good, or mobility, so you're starting from some goods, or another one was, I made a proposal in the past, is unemployment. Employment is the good. So for instance, we entered some years ago a proposal that was to guarantee, so the unemployment subsidy should be European. Mm-hmm. And there were a paper, a French and German paper, explained that it is possible, obviously, considering a different risk in the labor market. For instance, Italy is a risky labor market, so we have to contribute more than Germans. It's like an insurance, but a European insurance. So when somebody gets unemployed, he will receive directly from Brussels. So it's an evolution of SURE. So trying to define the common goals. And
what about difference?
The difference is that we do not start, we don't move from the general treaties, but is the function system.
No, what about defense policy? I mean, we have an initiative here. Yeah.
Well, I don't enter in that. I mean, it's not my field.
But that's the thing, though, isn't it?
I have no idea on that, on the defense. You know, the problem is that according to the defense, the problem we have is that we produce a lot of weapons and different. For instance, I don't know how many planes we have in Europe, different products. If you stay in the NATO, they accept just their standard weapons. So the United States, they produce a lot of weapons, but at the same type. There is On the contrary, we have French types, German type. So the idea, the first thing to do is try to reduce the expenses, so producing together weapons. And so we do not waste money. But this is a practical solution, it's not a political one. So I will just suggest background. I think we are not ready to I mean, it's not a priority, I think, to have a common defense. The priority is to have a common unemployment system, defending the welfare model, a common mobility procedure. We have already, the TENS, the corridors. So we have to implement our European corridors that obviously involve the Switzerland because you are in the middle, of Europe, and probably declare a common good energy. This, I think, will be the best. A common European defense. We are in the NATO. Most of the countries. I think now almost all the countries are in the NATO except maybe Austria. I don't remember. Some of them are out. But that is the item. How we still have to be influenced by NATO, by having a European defense. I mean, if it's not a priority. I know that in this moment it looks a priority.
When will it be, if not now?
No, I mean, I know that in this moment we say we should.
I'm not arguing for that. I'm against that, but I'm just kidding, when, if not now?
To have a common defense?
Yeah.
In Europe, we spend a lot of time discussing things. I mean, if we start discussing that, because, it's a Jean Monnet approach. It's a step by step. I don't think it's the first step. The first step is energy. We have to be independent from Russia. We don't have to fight Russia. I mean, we can fight Russia, but the new problem is to be independent from Russia and then from Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and all the countries that
Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan and whatever. I mean, all the countries that are giving us also respecting the environment. So, personally, I spent 10 years in the Defense Commission in the Parliament. 10 years. So.
European Parliament?
No, the Italian. So, I don't think we have to start from there.
You spoke now several times about that it should be an European answers, not like European Union answers. But when I think about, for example, the energy market, it is in Switzerland very distinct apart from the whole political system, or maybe, I mean, I don't know whether you want to go into that, but Serbia definitely has other energy-wise interests, and maybe you can elaborate some about those interfaces. What do you think about the interfaces between EU states and non-EU states, and maybe also you have also ideas about how you can create aligned interests in that field?
Yeah, I'm skeptical about the European responses. We just said, Germany is investing huge amounts of money, like 5% of the GDP. It's huge, more than they committed to the defense spending. So this is 2 times larger. And this is, as I understood, only for this coming winter, to help citizens and companies. So it's not even changing the providers of energy, so thinking about new sources of supply or things like that. I really don't see how, or you have the example of Norway. Okay, it's not a EU member state, but it's earning lots of money at the moment. I mean, charging prices, and other European countries are asking, okay, where is the solidarity now that we need it? So I'm a bit skeptical about that. I mean, Serbia, of course, I mean, we are mostly dependent on Russian gas, as many countries of the Central and Eastern Europe. But I've seen the approach of our government that we are now, there was some EU conference a few days ago with opening of this new pipeline going from Greece, right? So we were there, and the whole Western Balkans. So I think Serbia will try to have any kind of help from the, or you know, to follow the European policy, whatever, whichever policy is that in the end. But I'm not sure whether there will be in the near future something like some common proposal. We discussed that also over the lunch. I mean, alternatives are really, I mean, they're not that many. They're like renewables, but they're maybe not that reliable, or you need to have like storages built in order to update, you know, to have this kind of higher reliability. LNG, it seems also that that's not the perfect option. I mean, even the Americans are quite frank, saying that they're not sure that they can provide, you know, stable supplies for the coming years. So, and then you end up discussing with Qatar or Saudi Arabia or Azerbaijan. And if you say that you will work only with the countries that you share common values with, I mean, it's really not.
With many options.
Yeah. So,
No oil, no gas.
But maybe I meant maybe more on about the interfaces between European Union countries and non-European Union countries, because my takeaway until now from you, Mr. Monti, everyone, I guess, is like European Union goes in a direction and the other states will follow, but maybe there should be more than that.
mm-hmm. Well, at least for the Balkans, I think, you know, they will follow what the EU, yeah. But for others, I mean, we were also discussing Switzerland has different structure of energy sources than other countries, so 30% from the water, that's geography, you know, thanks to its geography, so not many countries can do that. So I don't know, also the UK, but I guess that's not a priority now, UK, they have their own problems, so I don't know.
Oh, well, I said follow because I mean, it's not a problem of the European Union. In the European Union, you have 3 countries that are in the G7. Italy, France, and Germany. So that's the difference. I mean, if you put the 3 countries together, you have GDP, or I think the rest of Europe never reach the half of the GDP. So it's an economic power. I mean, that's why we don't want that the other will follow. We naturally follow. So that's why it's important to share with them decisions, because what we decide will influence the other countries, obviously.
But still, you cannot have a as we just mentioned, Germany, you know, having it so.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why we are calling
That's
for
why I
a
said
common,
yeah.
a common response. Otherwise, but before defense, I will propose to settle the immigration policy. Because Italy and Greece are calling for a common immigration policy with fast success. So before defense, first we decided how we manage migrants, then we can decide about defense.
Yeah.
10 years or 12 years, I don't know how much time we are spending on migration. No solution. No solution. That should be before. Also because Ukraine, now we have also war and immigration is strictly connected. We know that.
But as you said, I mean, we are discussing policy here, but politics seems to be, you know, much important at the end of the day, because why is Germany doing this? I mean, they have pressure from their, citizens protesting, and that this is what they offered. So it's really, so obvious. So you cannot escape that.
They could do it at the beginning.
What do you mean?
No, we said they did it because they used the national funds.
No, of course, but I'm just saying that's a result of the pressure of the, citizens, because they're concerned about the coming winter, and not only, more about, I think, business community than ordinary citizens, because they said, I was looking at the German plan, it was like beginning of September, and they made a plan of the power cuts in case they are needed. So, and the first on that list were companies. Then the citizens. So they're the first one, that would suffer unless this package was implemented.
Also, Italy, we are preparing package. Not so huge, but we are preparing another package.
Yeah.
Because if there are no common position, or the big, let's say, Germany is the first industrial power. We are the second. So after Germany, if the European Commission will not decide, we will decide by our own. Obviously, we risk to stop half of our companies. We have 20% of the GDP produced by manufacturers. And the difference of Germany have medium, big companies.
Yeah.
We have small and medium companies. So we are, let's say, really at risk. We have to intervene before Christmas.
Yeah.
And the new government is preparing for that. We are studying how to catch the money, and it's national one. And then we come friends. Obviously, you go, the biggest has the biggest problem, then the second and the third and the fourth, but everybody will face the problem. So that's why we call for, advocate for a common decision as soon as possible. Otherwise, the effect of Germany will be, let's say, a domino effect. Everybody will act by their own.
And perhaps just to build on the point that you made, from the kind of more integrated European perspective, there are these rather long-term collaborations around infrastructure, and Switzerland is also the core, geographically the center of a number of infrastructural projects, also in terms of transport, to diversify and to move on to the railways connections across Europe through Switzerland. I think there is also a very important aspect, which is again more long-term, but on innovation for renewable energies, which is perhaps driven at some point by the European Union, but to which Switzerland and other countries that are not members are really part of. So I think these are also ways to kind of join forces across the continent, but the immediate responses seems to be rather driven by the EU.
Swiss companies are participating to the Horizon.
Yes.
It's open to all EFTA countries. So research is all Europe.
Transversal.
I think even the Balkans.
Yeah, sure.
So, research is pan-European.
Yes.
Exactly. That is another common point.
Yeah. So we are running out of time. So maybe would you like to have a final word, each of you, on one important aspect that you would like to highlight again, or have we managed to wrap up this discussion and this workshop in a way that you see satisfactory?
I just had one idea. I don't know how much you work with other actors that we mentioned, unions or civil society organizations, but for me, I think the thing that you prepared today and this a policy brief, or maybe you can spread the word and also,
Yes.
yeah.
Build a group, a network of
We have
Just
that
send
idea
out,
to
yes.
to have a periodical meeting.
Or
Yeah.
meeting, yeah, of course. I mean, just
The second one will be in Italy.
I was, for instance, I had a similar talk to this to this one with the it's the largest trade union groups in Serbia. So I think it's important
to
for
engage.
them,
Yes.
so that they're aware because they're also participating in their European meetings. So they're aware of these kinds of trends that we are envisaging, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
That
you're
would be
right,
really
because
interesting also for
when we decided
for
who
Switzerland.
inviting here, we had a list of 40 papers, policy brief published in the last 2 years. So there is really a huge number. That is just for the first analysis. So probably there are much more. But there is a production of policy briefs in this period dealing with this item, very, very important.
Okay.
So it's important to share
Yes.
and sometimes to meet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Say an emergency community.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this great insights, very useful collective discussion today, and hopefully also in the coming days, weeks, and months. So we'll surely be in touch, and we thank also the colleagues. I think some of them joined online. Maybe they didn't intervene in this final talk. So yes, we'll brief you about the publication of the brief, or at least the circulation of this policy brief that we are drafting together. Thank you very much to you for joining. Thank you for coming to Geneva, and have a nice evening. Thank you very much.